There is a tiredness that rest cannot fix, a weakness that willpower alone cannot overcome, and a very particular feeling that the body you have known your entire life has simply stopped responding to your efforts. If you have ever woken up theoretically rested but completely exhausted in practice, if you have ever done everything right with your diet and your workouts and watched the scale refuse to move, if you have ever felt your mind scramble for words in the middle of a simple sentence, then this documentary was made for you. Subscribe to the channel right now and hit the notification bell, because what you are about to discover here may change the way you understand your own body from this day forward. Something is happening inside the bodies of millions of women every single day. In silence, without alarm, without an immediate diagnosis, without anyone around them being able to see it. It is an invisible process, gradual and slow, that begins years before any more obvious symptom appears, and that most women attribute to stress, to the pace of life, to age, to their emotions. But it is none of those factors in isolation. It is menopause acting from the inside out, organizing every system in the female body from a single central change: the progressive decline of estrogen. Estrogen is not simply the hormone of reproduction. It is, in practice, one of the most powerful metabolic regulators in the female body. It protects muscle tissue, influences how cells produce and use energy, regulates mood, sustains memory, stabilizes sleep, and controls where and how fat is deposited in the body. When its levels begin to fall, all of that enters into imbalance at the same time. And the result is exactly what so many women describe with the same frustration: persistent tiredness that never goes away, a loss of strength that advances too slowly to be noticed, difficulty losing weight even while doing everything that used to work, and a mental fog that interferes with concentration, memory, and clarity of thought. What needs to be said clearly is that this is not weakness. It is not lack of discipline. It is not imagination. It is physiology. It is a woman's body responding in a completely predictable way to a real and documented hormonal change. And what is not being said with the same clarity is that there are ways, grounded in solid science, to intervene in these processes and meaningfully soften their effects. Most of the recommendations that reach women at this stage of life focus on a balanced diet, light exercise, hydration, and stress management. All of them are valid. None of them are sufficient on their own, because what is happening inside the cells, in the muscles, in the metabolism, and in the brain during menopause requires a more specific, more precise, more targeted kind of attention directed at what is actually being lost in this process. And this is where a compound enters the picture that the science of sports has known for decades, that neurology has begun investigating with growing interest, and that women's health is discovering now, with increasingly consistent studies pointing to benefits that go far beyond what was previously imagined. This compound was not created for elite athletes. It is not exclusive to men. It is not an experimental product. It is one of the most studied substances in the entire history of human physiology: creatine. To understand why creatine matters so much in the context of menopause, it is first necessary to understand what is being lost most rapidly during this phase. Muscle tissue, which already begins to decline naturally from around the age of 35 in a process called sarcopenia, undergoes a significant acceleration with the drop in estrogen. And this matters for reasons that go far beyond aesthetics or physical strength. Muscle is the primary metabolically active tissue in the body. It is what determines the speed at which the basal metabolism functions. It is what regulates insulin sensitivity. It is what controls, to a large extent, where fat accumulates in the body. When muscle mass decreases, the metabolism slows down, fat finds space to accumulate, especially in the abdominal region, the energy available to cells drops, and the entire body operates at a state of lower efficiency. It is a cycle that feeds itself and that needs to be interrupted. Creatine acts directly at this point. It is not a hormone. It does not replace estrogen, but it works precisely where the decline of estrogen causes the most damage: in the production of cellular energy, in the preservation and recovery of muscle tissue, in the metabolism, and, as science has shown with increasing consistency, also in the functioning of the brain. In the first link in the description, we have left a supplement that has been helping many women navigate this phase with more balance and fewer symptoms. If you would like to explore it later, it will be there waiting for you. Creatine works because the human body, in order to carry out any function, from a thought to a muscle movement, depends on a molecule called ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is the most basic form of cellular energy available. The The problem is that ATP depletes quickly, and the body must constantly regenerate it. Creatine, stored in the muscles and in the brain, is the primary source of phosphate used to regenerate ATP in situations of energy demand. When creatine stores are low, the body takes longer to recover energy, cells function less efficiently, and the feeling of fatigue sets in more easily. When those stores are adequately replenished, ATP production is faster, more efficient, and the entire body responds better. The first benefit of creatine for women in menopause is exactly this: a real increase in daily energy. Not the artificial energy of a stimulant, which lasts a few hours and then causes a crash, but true cellular energy, the kind that sits at the foundation of every function in the body. Women who supplement with creatine consistently report, and studies confirm, a noticeable improvement in their energy levels throughout the day, in their capacity to sustain physical and mental effort, and in the reduction of that unexplained exhaustion that has no apparent cause. For anyone living with the fatigue of menopause every single day, that difference is not small. It is transformative. The second benefit is directly tied to the most silent problem of menopause: the loss of muscle mass. Creatine is, today, one of the compounds with the most accumulated scientific evidence for muscle preservation and recovery. It increases the muscle's capacity to recover after exertion, reduces the process of protein degradation, and supports the cellular environment necessary for muscle tissue to remain functional. For women over 45 who are watching this mass decrease at an accelerated rate because of hormonal decline, creatine supplementation can represent a real and measurable difference in body composition over time. The third benefit is the acceleration of basal metabolism, and here the logic is straightforward. More muscle means a faster metabolism. By helping to preserve and recover muscle tissue, creatine contributes indirectly to the metabolism functioning at a speed more compatible with the body's needs. This means the body begins to process nutrients more efficiently, burn calories more consistently, and respond better to dietary choices. For the woman who feels she is doing everything right and still cannot see results, understanding this mechanism is the first step toward breaking that cycle. The fourth benefit follows the same logic and concerns abdominal fat, which is one of the most common and most frustrating symptoms of menopause. With the decline of estrogen, the body redistributes fat, favoring accumulation in the central region. Creatine does not eliminate fat directly, but by improving muscle composition and accelerating metabolism, it creates the conditions necessary for the body to progressively reduce that accumulation. It is an indirect action but a sustained one that manifests consistently over the long term. The fifth benefit is one of the least discussed and one of the most important: cognitive improvement. The mental fog of menopause, that feeling that thoughts arrive more slowly, that names disappear on the tip of the tongue, that concentration slips away more easily than before, has a real physiological basis. The brain, just like muscle, depends on ATP to function, and recent research has shown that creatine supplementation improves the availability of brain energy, with measurable impact on short-term memory, processing speed, and mental clarity. For women who are experiencing this cognitive loss as part of the menopause process, this finding completely changes the way they can look at the role of creatine. The sixth benefit lies in physical recovery. One of the most common complaints among women in menopause is that the body takes much longer to recover after any kind of exertion, whether a longer walk, a strength training session, or even an intense day of work. This happens because cellular energy production is compromised and the muscle regeneration process is slower. Creatine, by optimizing ATP production and reducing the muscle damage caused by exertion, accelerates this recovery process directly. The practical result is that women are able to move more consistently, without feeling that every effort carries too high a price. The seventh benefit is perhaps the most subjective, but no less real for that: the impact on mood and overall disposition. Studies have been investigating the relationship between creatine and mental health, and the results are promising. The central hypothesis is that by improving the availability of energy in brain cells, creatine reduces a type of cellular stress associated with low mood, irritability, and depressive states. For women living with the emotional instability that is typical of menopause, an improvement in this area represents a concrete change in daily quality of life. It is at this point that an important pause is needed, because creatine, like any powerful resource, can be used incorrectly. And many women who come to this supplement do so without understanding how it works within the specific hormonal context of menopause. They use inadequate doses, expect immediate results, or combine it with strategies that contradict its own effects. The result is frustration and premature abandonment of something that, when used correctly, could make a real difference. In the first link in the description, you will find a supplement designed specifically to help with the symptoms of menopause while the body readapts. It is worth taking a look. The central substance behind everything described here has a precise technical name: creatine monohydrate. It is the most studied, most absorbed, and most documented form of the compound. It is not a new product. It is not an unfounded promise. It is one of the molecules with the most accumulated research in the entire history of human physiology, with hundreds of clinical studies published in high-impact scientific journals, covering everything from athletic performance to metabolic health, cognitive function, and more recently women's health during menopause. What science is showing with growing clarity is that creatine monohydrate acts directly on the points most compromised by the hormonal decline of menopause: cellular energy production, muscle tissue preservation, metabolic regulation, and brain function. Not as a substitute for hormones, but as a metabolic and neurological ally that works within the biological structures that estrogen can no longer protect in the same way. When used correctly with proper guidance, the right dosage, and realistic expectations, creatine is not simply a performance supplement reserved for athletes. For women in menopause, it may be one of the most consistent and most underestimated resources available to navigate this phase with more energy, more strength, more mental clarity, and a genuinely better quality of life. If this documentary opened a new perspective for you, subscribe to the channel right now, because the next videos continue this conversation with the same depth, bringing more science, more practical tools, and more answers to what your body is going through at this stage of life. Leave a like, share this with a woman who needs to hear it, and we will see you in the next chapter.